Everyone wants more money, but most of us weren't taught how to create an abundant life. That's where the Law of Attraction, Manifesting Success Stories show comes in. If you are ready to have more money, create more freedom, and experience more fun, turn the volume up. It's time to learn how to create the prosperity and life you have been dreaming of. Here's your host, Cassie Parks.
Hello, and welcome to this episode. I am your host, Cassie Parks, and I'm back with Kate Allett. I always stumble, like parents with or aunts with young nieces and nephews will know, like Owlette is DJ Masks, and that's what I think of for a second.
No worries. That and Kretzinger, like how can anybody pronounce those names?
Right?
Talk about going from one bad last name to another one. How you doing, Cassie?
Amazing. And of course, Kate is K8 for wellness. So, yeah, she's awesome at that. I don't know if we've talked about this recently. I'm going to ask you, let's do this first. How has your future self been showing up?
Oh, she's been showing up. How can I put this characteristically? Because I like giving the characteristics. Patient is one. Very patient. And then I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then also just being true to herself and confident.
Yeah. I'm going to put you on a spot. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but I make you guys, right? Because often the first time I'll be like, how do you fit yourself? And you guys will like tell a story and not necessarily a bad story, right? Like a good story about, and I ask you to always put it into a characteristic. How has that, like defining it and bringing it down to being true to herself, like confident, like how has that shifted and made her show up more?
Because it means so much more than just the story that we share, because it shows up in many different ways. So it's great to just put it into that characteristic because it shows up not just, I don't know if I'm explaining this properly, but how I want it to come across. But if I were to put it in a specific story, it almost makes me not see the other ways that it's just like that too. Does that make sense? Am I saying that right? Okay. So that's why I think it's awesome that we put it in characteristically, because for that reason, because that characteristic shows up in many different areas in our life.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's exactly why, right?
Yeah.
I want you to see it's becoming the pattern. It's becoming the normal.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yay. That was great. So what's awesome because you are showing up true to yourself and
all kinds of things are coming to me. Oh my gosh. I know we were going to talk a little bit about this too, but wishes being granted by my wish granter, Cassie Parks. So, we've been talking about, how we want our future selves to show up. And one of mine is to work out at my home. And we are closing on our house in a couple weeks, and I'm going to be able to work out at home. So I'm super excited. That's where the patience comes in, because that can't happen fast enough. So that saves me 2 hours every morning. I'm super excited about having 2 extra hours in the morning.
Amazing.
Right? Because when I do my future self scripting, I don't wake up to an alarm. I just wake up. Right now, I have to wake up to an alarm to give myself time to do the things that my future self does and have my morning rituals. And now I'm not going to have to.
Yay! That's awesome.
It is awesome. So that's like really, because we changed my script. It was a couple of weeks ago, and here we are almost a month later. I'm getting what I was scripting. So.
Exactly. Right. Yes. So we can go into that now. So it's, I don't know if we ever share this on an interview, but I think it's worth revisiting the story, right? So the first step, like in one of your first scripts, it was heated workout space.
Yes.
Right? It was warm, like whether it's in a basement or whatever, like that's the key, right? Is like you're not in a freezing cold garage.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Yourself has warmth. And I'm going to use this to teach a little bit, right? It's the first thing you could see was like, oh, I just want a warm workout space. right? And so then you started playing and started scripting in that. And it wasn't a couple weeks after that script that David was like, oh, do you want to use my office? Right?
Yeah. That was so awesome.
Yeah. And so you moved your equipment to the basement of his office, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So you had a warm space, and it's like, oh, now I see that. Now I can see more. Oh, but she doesn't drive for this. This is easy, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, over time, and we'll talk a little bit how we made this shift in your script, but then it's the shift to, oh no, it's in my basement because it's, I have my equipment. It's easy. Like, of course that is. Why would you drive in it? Why would you drive 2 hours to work out?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. It was so funny how that did unfold, because it was almost like you said, it was a couple weeks later that David did say, oh, do you just want to do it in the basement of my office? And I'm like, oh, why didn't we think of that sooner? I mean, like, because it was always, in the winter, at late fall, winter, and then into spring, it was too cold to be out in our garage because it wasn't heated or insulated.
Yeah.
So I always had to go to like a corporate gym, and I don't like those places. My future self doesn't wait for equipment.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, it was pretty important for me to have that. And so I have it, and now it's going to be in my basement.
In your basement. Yes.
Yeah.
And I love what you said. I just want to highlight for people listening. It's like, why didn't we think of that sooner? It's like, because you didn't resonate with it, right?
Exactly.
Like, that happens all the time in our futures. Like, oh, the answer was right there. I just couldn't see it.
Exactly. It was right under our nose.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
It's awesome.
I love it. Well, let's talk about, let's get the total, because I don't want to.
Yeah. I was going to say, can I share my total?
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I can't pass. Like, we're going to continue on this script and the workout conversation. Yeah.
Okay.
What's your new total?
My new total, you still don't have that drum roll, do you?
I don't.
It's $118,591.22.
Yay!
And one of those pennies is the penny that I found when we were at the castle.
Yes, I love it.
I love that story. That was awesome.
I do too. And if you, so in between the interview that you're hearing and this interview was a future self when we all went to the Paradise Valley Castle, that came out around July of 2018. So if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I don't know, she's talking about the castle or celebrating the penny, like, you can go back and listen to that episode about stepping into her future self at the castle.
That was so fun.
It was so fun. And it was so fun. Like, the penny, like, so we had just taken some shots. It was awesome because the photographer's like, whoever wants individual shots, like, the light is amazing. We did some group and we were toasting. And then she's like, this is the place to get individuals, right? If you want a dressed up individual. And we were all walking back to go to the pool and do more celebration shots, more champagne shots. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, Penny!
That was so funny.
It was so awesome.
But it was so great for everybody else to be screaming and celebrating with me, because usually, Dave would be like, oh, yay, Penny. Right. But everybody else started screaming with me, which was awesome.
Yes. Oh, it was so awesome. And my favorite part, it was, because I tell you guys this all the time, but it really is. It was the same excitement that we had hugged and celebrated the $55,000 that you had told me 24 hours prior, almost in the exact same spot.
Yes, that's right. It was. Yeah. Oh my God, I didn't think of that. It was in the same exact spot.
Yeah. And
oh my gosh.
So, yeah. It just, if anyone ever wonders, do we really celebrate pennies like thousands of dollars? We do.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Yes, we do. And we don't treat it any different than if it's 1,000 or a penny.
That's right. Because it's all money coming in. Yep.
That's right. That's great.
I love it. $118,591.22. How does that feel to have, like, that is a total that's black and white? That's not, I want this. That's what's happened to me.
That has happened. And it's funny when you think about it, because it's been just a little over a year. Yep. It was a year at the end of March, right? Mm-hmm. When I think about that, I was like, wow, that's a lot, to think. And it doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but yet it was and it wasn't, because so much growth has happened in between. When I think about it, I was like, oh, that wasn't that long ago. But I was like, but it feels like a long time ago because of everything in between.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's awesome to see that I did that. And I'm sure there's things that I've missed that,
Right.
that is not accounted for in there. And I try and think about it all the time. I carry around a little notebook that I can put it down in, or I have stickies in my truck, so I make sure that I write it down. When I found the penny at the castle, because I didn't have any of that with me, I put it in my phone to remind me for an alarm to go off when I was in my office, that Monday.
Yes.
So I could remember to put it down. So I try to find these little ways to try and make sure that I get everything in there, but I'm sure there's things that I forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just assume there's like a 10 to 20% additional, right?
Oh, well, think about it. Mother's Day was Sunday. I forgot my
Yeah.
daughter paid for dinner for us for Mother's
That
Day.
was
So I
awesome.
didn't even put that in there,
Yeah.
so, and that was an expensive meal. So so there's things in there that definitely were not accounted for. So 10% sounds right.
Yeah, I love that. And so talk a little bit. I love that you shared your tracking practice, because everyone has their own unique one. Like, what difference has it made to be so committed to tracking that number?
I think because it makes us more aware. So it builds that habit, that muscle, like as you're always working it. So it's funny, every time I get out of my truck now, I look around my truck, right? Because I always find money
Yeah.
by my truck. Always. My truck is a money magnet. That's I'm going to call it my money magnet. I get out and I kid you not, when I'm walking through the parking lot of Whole Foods, I always find something on the ground. Always.
Love it.
And so it's just really funny. And not only there, at the top of a mountain,
Yes.
2 weekends ago, when I was marrying my favorite friends, my best friends, I found a dime at the top of a mountain.
Yes. Like a
It's awesome. I was like screaming, I found a dime. And they're like, yay. Like, they have no idea what I'm doing.
right? But like the top of the mountain, like
Yes.
this isn't a hill. Like, she's not talking about, like, some places
No.
call hills mountains.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
this
this is
is,
a
you have to
mountain.
get up in the morning and hike this mountain, right? And like
Yes.
really the top of the mountain.
Yes, it took 2 hours to hike up, and it was still snow at the top.
Yeah.
No snow at the bottom, but snow at the top. It was just really funny that because we went up in the dark,
Yeah.
and so we were coming down after sunrise, and that's when I found it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what I love about that is people will always, in the beginning, I don't hear it much anymore, probably because I'm like, whatever, but like people would be like, well, I don't live a place where you can find money. Like, you can find money
Oh yeah.
anywhere. You just
can.
have to be open to it, right?
Well, I don't think I've ever shared this story with you. A couple weekends ago, I was with my son and his fiance and David in Portland, Maine, because we were spending some time. My son's moving, so we went and spent the day together in Portland, Maine, and so we were paying for the meter, and we were like scrounging for change in the truck. We just couldn't find enough change to put into the meters. So we were all laughing about it, So we end up going into the escape room, and we come out, and I'm finding pennies all the way to the truck. And we had been scrounging for change to pay for the meter. And so when I was like, I found a penny. Oh my God, I found another penny. Oh my God, I found a nickel. Like they were laughing at me the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, we could use that before the escape room,
Right?
not after. It was so funny. So it's just interesting how and what's even more amazing about that is that when we were putting money into the meter, a homeless guy had asked us if we had change.
Mhm.
And I was just like, oh, we're looking for change for ourselves. I'm sorry, we don't have anything right now. And the fact that it was on the ground in the direction he was walking in, like that he didn't see that. We saw it on the way back out.
Yeah.
So it was kind of interesting how that worked.
It is interesting, right? I don't know if I've ever told this on a podcast or not, but you reminded me of it. So my friend and I, who's actually an Enchanted Circle member, we were leaving improv class a couple of years ago, and this woman came up and asked for money change. She was a homeless woman, and I didn't take anything in, so I had nothing. But it was interesting. So by the time I got to my car and got in my car, my friend and I she had walked above. Somebody had given her a handful of change, and she was literally just throwing the pennies away.
Oh no.
Yeah. And we were both like, you just but you just asked for money and you got it. And
Yeah.
you're just like, you know,
Wow.
just, yeah.
Think about what that says, right?
Yeah. Well, that was you, right? Were you the one? Yeah. You used to throw the pennies out the window, right?
Yes.
How
And
far? That was so long ago. Go ahead.
so long ago, it was because my kids were young and I was still driving them up to Maine, so I think, when I think about that stuff now, when I see that penny, I'm like, I can't believe all of the pennies that I used to throw out the window, and what that said to my kids, about money too. And, it's interesting. Like, I would never do that now.
Yeah.
That's how I
Yeah.
feel about it.
Yeah.
Because I remember that first assignment that you gave us of celebrating, like looking at a penny, getting excited about it, look at a dollar bill, get excited about it, look at the highest amount bill that you have, whatever it was that you had on you, and get the same feelings for that. So I was just kind of like, wow, I've come a long way since then.
You have. Like, I love how this story is all wrapped up and kind of going back to the beginning.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, like when I really think about it that way. And it's like, wow, think of the story I was telling my kids when we were throwing pennies out the window, trying to
Right?
hit the signs, the street signs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
crazy.
so interesting. I know, but you can shift and you can learn to celebrate and be that person in any moment, which is,
Yes.
if anyone's listening, like, what I want you to take away from that is you can shift. Like, it doesn't matter, right? We look at it because we're like, oh, that's who I used to be, and it matters in that term. But like, now you celebrate every penny, which means you find dimes at the top of the mountain and you've manifested almost $120,000.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Which is so awesome.
Yeah, it is.
I love it. Well, let's see. Let's talk about what's the biggest shift in the last 30 days.
Oh, so I think the biggest shift, and I think I say this every time you ask, it's the trust and really honoring who my true self is.
Yes.
And the biggest one, I found yesterday, my biggest aha yesterday was when I had said yes to something a couple weeks ago, and it really wasn't in alignment with what I was looking to, for my future self to be and to do. And it was just funny how that whole scenario kind of unraveled, how it played out. And yesterday there was a huge aha to me saying, oh, this is where this is coming from. For me, it's a lot of it shows up. I think because I'm just so sensitive to a lot of stuff, it comes out on my skin, it comes out in my digestive system, and it showed up on my skin, and it's been around for 19 days. and the one day yesterday, it popped into my head when I was listening to this podcast, and it's like, okay, why is this here? Why is this ailment there? And I was like, oh my gosh, it gave me that aha, like, oh, I said yes to something that I didn't feel comfortable with, or that wasn't in alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally came to that realization, I no longer have the itch. And, the poison ivy is now dried up and gone. And it's just funny how it reacts that quick for me. And I had the same kind of a situation with my mom back in the day when I wasn't able to voice some stuff. I wasn't able to walk. But when I was finally able to voice it, instantly, that same second, I was able to put weight on my foot again.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does find its way into parts of my body that if I can't voice it or I'm not being true to myself, it shows up as an ailment for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean for everybody, but it does for me. And so anyway, it was kind of funny that I didn't see that until I heard that podcast.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, there it is.
Right. Well, I wonder, were you aware that, like, because the way I see it, and I want to hear your version, because as your coach, what I see is like, oh, that makes total sense, because you said yes as a past self, sort of a habit, and not that you wouldn't have wanted to do that in the past. It's something
Right.
that sounded fun, right?
Yep.
But it was your future self that was like, no. She's the one who had the reaction.
Yes. And it was because everything that I said yes to, it was just a program,
Right,
a
and it
workout
was-
program.
Yeah.
Right up my alley. I love that stuff. And, but it was true what you and I were talking about just before this recording. It's all about me showing my clients that you can do it on your own. It's what feels good to you, and listening to your body and doing it that way. And when when he had sent me the stuff, I was like, well, this is all CrossFit. I don't want to do CrossFit anymore. And I had just been doing like all calisthenic stuff and using bands, and light weights and high reps. And then now he wants me to move fast again. And I was like, no, this is not how my body feels like it wants to move. And so, yeah, it was kind of funny. I didn't pick up on that right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes total sense, because it does
make total
future
sense.
self, right? Like your current self could have done it and she'd been fine, but it was your future self. Like, this is not setting us up for success, right? Like, we can't tell people the whole package if you went back this way.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was so funny that I see it this way, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you were so right. Funny how if you listen, and you're open to listening, how the message comes across.
Yeah.
And that you're able to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting how it was awesome. So I'm glad I figured it out, because now I feel good.
Me too. Because I was like, before we even got on, I'm like, I'm not even going to ask, because it's going to be gone by Monday. It's over.
That's right.
Intention last Monday that it was over. No more itching, no more. So yeah.
That's right. It's so funny, because I even said it to the women yesterday here at the office. They were asking me like, how's your poison ivy? I was like, we're not asking that anymore. And they're like, okay. Because they know like how I think, and they think the same way too. And I was like, we're not giving that energy anymore. She's like, okay, so how's your calm and smooth skin feeling? It's so funny. So yeah, they were not surprised when I told them this morning too about what happened on my ride home, and they totally get that stuff too. So yeah, it was interesting.
Oh, I love it.
Good stuff.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit so we shifted. That's the biggest shift, is really coming to that. And I think that isn't a lot. It's all tied in, right? So about a month ago, I don't know how it came about, but it came up, which is, I had told you before the call, like as your coach, I had been looking at your script and I'm like, something's not right. But I couldn't see it. And I also couldn't be like, this wouldn't be your morning. Like, this is your life. You get to choose, right? But something was like, there was no fun in it, right? Yeah. And so we went and we started talking about what that script was originally supposed to be, right? Which was
for 100 clients a day.
Yeah.
And that's what it was, but it wasn't from my home. And that was part of, because I was leaving and going to the office and doing that. And you were like, oh, well, that's where it is. Why don't we do it so that a day that you don't have to go into the office? Right. And I was like, okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
So when we started doing that, it's funny you say that, because now I'm just realizing this. When we changed that, I got 2 clients. And then I got 2 more yesterday. Yeah. And the online group session stuff came to me, was more inspired action. I was able to start writing it down, putting into Word document, Google Docs, which I'm almost done with, actually. I worked on it again today. And so I'm ready to start putting it into Kajabi so I can get it started. Yeah, I'm super excited about that too. So it was just funny how that it just all unraveled.
Right? Because it was all, which is interesting, because I want to break this part a little bit. This is so fun, because we can, we're getting to a point where we can like break down and show the whole path, right? So it was, you had tried to start an online program a while ago, right? And
a year ago. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we actually talked about it in earlier interviews, right? Like it kind of filled up, and then Inspired Action said, which I love this actually, because Inspired Action was like, end that price, right? And raise the price.
Yep.
And you did. But what that was really moving you towards was shutting that program down, right? It was like a stop, and then there was going to be another stop, because it didn't come out of, I don't know what it came out of. And it could have come out of inspiration, right?
Yeah, I can't even remember.
And it doesn't even matter, because if it's inspiration, awesome. And if it wasn't, that makes sense too, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so then you've been, doing your clients. And then in the last workshop, it was like 100 clients from because the thing about you is you want to be able to work from anywhere. You love your office, but you want to be able to travel. You want that life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was supposed to be 100 clients and what that client day would look like. Right. And yeah. And so you're scripting it and I'm like, yeah. And I could see it. Right. But then we talked about it. I'm like, what's different if you have 100 clients? Like, and somewhere in it, like I remember, I'm like, you would be somewhere else. Like you wouldn't be in an office, right?
Right.
100 online clients. Why have an right? Other than if you want to have an office, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so funny because I was thinking that too after we had talked about that. I was like, you know what? An office works for me right now because we still have kids at home during the summer.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense to have it right now. But
Right.
3 more years, they're not going to be living with us.
Yeah.
And that makes more sense to have it at home, but it'd be great to start it all, even when I'm here at the office, to start it all online so that when I want to go home or if I'm on vacation, I can still do it.
Yes. So that you have that location freedom, right? Because even as they get older, because that's who your future self is.
Exactly.
So we started talking about that and I said scripted and you even in that moment were like, yeah, the online thing doesn't feel good.
No.
I don't want to do that. This happened last time. I didn't like it. And like this part.
Yeah.
And I said, just script your future self, like script the feel good of that day and that other stuff will come.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And it is.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Yesterday was the first day I got to do 2 hours with that new script.
Yes.
And it felt so fun and it felt great because I was able to do what I wanted to do. Like I worked out. I made breakfast for David and I, and then I went and did my meditation and my scripting. I got to work out, and then I got to work in my garden. I got to go climbing a little bit, in the evening, so it was really fun. I was like, oh, this is how it's supposed to happen.
Yes, right? And
Yeah.
so, we always this is what I talk about, like getting into alignment, stepping into your future self first. Like you had no idea how that program was going to go. And in fact, probably still didn't totally want it when we started scripting that.
No.
Right? But did you trust that it would change? Did you trust me? What said, let me write this script anyway? Let me script this.
I think it was trust. It was trusting you, obviously, and trusting the process and knowing that it would show up when it was supposed to. And it was funny because when we started talking about the online group together, was it the same day or the very next day, one of the doctor's patients here said to me, do you have anything online? And I was like, as a matter of fact,
right?
I'm working on it, and next month it should be done. And she's like, oh, can you put me on a list? Because I would love to do that with you. And I was like, oh my gosh. So she is patient. She actually reached out to me. She's like, any news when this is going to be done? And I was like, you know what? It's getting really close. You'll be the first to hear about it. And so I'm going to put her in there as my guinea pig and to have her give me some feedback and see how it, have her be the test subject to see how it's going to unroll, because it's a whole new way of doing it. I think even when you and I were talking about it, I had visions of it being the same way that it was. But it's totally different now. One of the things that you said to me, and I think David was sitting in here when we were doing the call, and you said, what about bite-sized? And he even, when he hung up, he goes, wow, that sounds so cool. That sounds, even when you said it, it felt right, but I just didn't know how it was going to look.
Yeah.
And he even said, he goes, what were you guys talking about? That sounded so awesome. And then so I explained it to him. And as I was talking to him about it, some things started popping into my head. And I was like, oh, all right, I'll write that down. So I wrote it down. And then I started scripting, because that's when we talked about changing the script, because you said to me, don't work on anything else. Don't fill in your hours with doing what you think you should be doing. Pick up your script and continue to script and continue your script. And I was like, okay, I hadn't been able to do that yet. And because my time has gotten filled in with other things, right? So I haven't even been able to pick up the script.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting how that came up. And then I said, one day, what was I doing? And I was like, oh, that would be so awesome to do it weekly. Like have them, like a topic be released during every week, but then have specific assignments for each day. Like, and paying attention to how it went last time that I felt was lacking, so I was able to put some of that stuff in. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so awesome. And so things just started flowing at that point. So it probably was about 2 weeks after you and I talked about it.
Yeah.
Because I just let it, actually, you and I talked about it and it had been a month before I actually started doing something with it.
Right.
And, I was like, yeah, it just didn't feel right at this time. And I don't know how it's going to look. And then when we started talking about the bite-sized stuff, I think it was 2 weeks from that.
Yeah.
That inspiration started hitting. And then this past weekend, I worked on it, which was awesome. And I worked on it again today, I'm wicked excited now. I'm really excited to get started. Yeah.
What's the difference like now when talk about what it feels like to be inspired and to have it flowing versus something else, Yeah.
So it's kind of like how the whole house situation happened. And we can talk a little bit about that too, but it was more about not forcing and just sitting with it and knowing it's there. And when things popped up, I'd write it down, and just say, okay, that sounds like really interesting and I would like to incorporate that. So I just write it down and I add it to my file of what it was going to look like. And I didn't press it. I just sat with it and was like, oh, that kind of feels good. And then just wrote it down and just forgot about it and trusted that it would come up. And that was that. I just laugh about it because I think about a year ago when I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to, write all this down and I have to make sure I get it from day one to the end, like all planned out. And I didn't have to do that this time.
Yeah.
It was just so easy how it just started flowing when I actually felt inspired to sit down and write about it. And new stuff was popping in when I was sitting down and just filling in between the lines, basically.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I said, okay, I'm going to set this time aside to do it. It just one day I said, you know what? I think I want to work on this. This feels like a good time. And I'd sit down and then all kinds of ideas started flowing to me. It wasn't the ideas flowed before, it was in the moment that they started flowing. So it was so easy.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
And I want to point out for everyone listening, it was mostly so easy because you were being the person with the program. You were scripting her. So in those moments, you were being her. It's already done. There's no stress about how is it. It's working amazingly.
Yes.
Right. And so that allows the amazing versus the year ago, right? Got to get it done, start to finish. I don't know how it's going to, I'm just going to do it. I don't know how it was going to serve people. Right. I think you thought you knew, but it's a little bit different. And so just being that person first and then allowing it to unfold.
I had to learn it first before I could teach other people.
Yeah.
Yep,
yeah.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like, how we were talking about how things are just easy, and just talk about, inspiration and things happening when it's meant to be. And everyone's always told me, even now they're like, oh my God, buying a house is so stressful. I have not felt stress once. And I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for the stress, but it's not coming, and nothing feels stressful about this situation. And it happened in 4 days. And talk about easy.
I know. Tell the story quickly, and we'll save the wish granting for next workshop because we'll have a little bit more to talk about it anyway. But so let's talk. Tell us the story of your house manifesting this house.
Yeah, that was awesome. So we were on our way. It was a busy weekend. It was prom weekend.
Hold on, I want to preface this. You've kind of been looking for a while, or
2 years.
2 years. Okay.
Yeah. And every time we find something, it's already been sold. By the time we reach out to our realtors, she's like, oh, that's already sold. And we've been through like 3 or 4 realtors, by the way.
Wow.
So we were just like, okay, you know what? We were renting. Our lease came up. It was up in March, and we went month to month. And because we both said, okay, this is the last year we are living in this house.
Yeah.
And so
then you started scripting.
Then we started scripting. That's right. And so
you've always been scripting.
But I think it's just because I've stepped into that easy space. This is how this is all is unraveling, right? So, because it was about the time that we changed the script too, to making my 100 client day easy.
Yes.
So it was a Saturday. We were out at David's office. We had to do our normal housework, office work. We clean his office every weekend. And it was just a busy day. We had to get north to marry my friends because it was going to be a long evening. It was a 2.5 hour ride north. We had to get up early in the morning. So we're like trying to rush to get up there. So we had left his office. We went and grabbed some lunch at this local place, and we jumped in the truck, and he goes, so he had said this email had come across saying that Zillow had a new posting, and it had only been posted for 2 hours. And so I was like, well, where is it? And he's like, oh, just Temple, which is the next town over from us. And it was on our way home. And that's where we were headed to get ready to go north. And I was like, oh, you just want to swing on through just to check out the area, because we're looking for a specific, like house that is set back from the road, has privacy, has acreage. And he's like, sure, let's just do it. And so we did. We went through and we drove by. Come to find out, it was actually 2 houses away from a house that we had looked at a year prior, or maybe 2 years prior. And so anyway, we were driving by, and these 2 guys are outside at the bottom of the driveway, and they were like moving heavy equipment. And I just rolled my window down. I said, hi, I was just wondering if we could drive up and take a peek. And the guy jokingly said, well, only if you're buying. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, we are. And he goes, yeah, go ahead, drive on up. And so we drove up, and he comes up behind us, and he introduced himself as the owner. And he goes, how did you hear about it? And I was like, well, we just saw a posting. He goes, well, my wife wasn't supposed to post that yet. It's not done. And he goes, I told her not to post it. And he's like, well, I can show you around. It's just keep in mind, nothing is done. And you could tell he was really embarrassed to have us there. And, but it was beautiful. It had the paint, some of the floors were down. It was just like the upstairs, and the appliances were in. And so he showed us around, and it was beautiful. It was perfect. It was all brand new. And it had the right amount of acreage. And, so we had said to him, he said, okay, so he goes, I have one lady that's interested in this. She's willing to pay cash. And he said, she's got first dibs. You guys got second. So we'll be in touch. So later that evening, he calls David, and we're up north for a wedding. So David just responded and said, can I call you tomorrow? Because we're here for a wedding. And he said, sure. So we called him in between the next day, and he said that he'd be willing to give us the opportunity to buy it or not. And so David's like, well, I got to talk to my kids first, and just make sure, because one of them is going to be driving an extra 15 minutes to school, and the one that's going to be living with us for 3 years. So he said, I'm going to see them on Monday. I'll let you know. So this was Sunday. Monday, we take the kids to the house, show them the extra drive, and they were excited. They loved the house, and we couldn't go in, but they could see the outside. And so we called him that night and said that it was a go. And we would give him the asking price if he'd cover the closing costs. And he's like, well, there's no realtor involved. He's like, we'll have to look into what that would cost. It's a new build. We don't know what that is and what that cost is. And so he's like, we'll check into it and get back to you. Next day, he calls us back, and he said, we're willing to cover $5,000 of the closing costs, and we don't have an actual number because it's a new build. Blah, blah, blah. So he goes on. And so we said, well, we'd love to move forward with it. And so he's like, all right. So 2 days later, the closing papers were all done. And so now we're in the process of gathering all the information for the mortgage company. And we've got a final date of June 10th. So that all happened within 4 or 5 days.
Yay!
And it was so awesome because there was no stress. There was no like battling for anything. It was just really cool because it wasn't even on the market. So nobody really had the opportunity to jump in either. And who knows why the lady said no, because it wasn't for her. It was for us.
Yes. Oh, yay.
So yeah, it was really cool. So when I stepped into that future self and scripting on ease and all that, this happened, which I thought was pretty cool.
It is very cool. Oh my gosh, I love it.
That's wishes granted too.
That is wishes granted too, right? Everyone wants easy house and like, oh, we just found it. And we said yes, and here it is, right? And I love it. Well, I know you have to run, so quickly tell everyone how they can connect with you if they want to improve their life through nutrition.
Sure. So I'm on all social media platforms. It's K8 for Wellness. That's the letter K, the number 8, the number 4, Wellness. And the website is k8forwellness.com. So they can find me there.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate, for being here and sharing this part of your story. I'm so excited to be back with our next interview and share what's happened since then.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for joining us on the Law of Attraction, Manifesting Success Stories show. To learn how to identify your current money story, go to identifyyourmoneystory.com.